Chris Hall is a writer and editor living in the hills of Berkeley. He writes regularly on sex, culture, politics, and other things at SF Weekly and at Slixa.com, and has a sparsely maintained blog called Lyric Perversions. You can stalk him by following him on Twitter as @literate_pervert. Please welcome the third of our Godless Perverts Trinity, Chris Hall.
So, we're Trinity now. Tonight, as part of that Trinity, I stand before you to sing the praises of unnatural sex. Now, usually when I say that, it involves holding a bag of 20-sided dice to calculate the results of having a bareback three-way with Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth, the lurker at the threshold. Tonight, however, I will be a little bit more down-to-earth in my definition. Everyone spends a lot of time obsessing about what natural sex is. Whatever it is, it's supposed to be good. That's probably the only thing that the family values crowd and the pervy, polyamorous, turn the kink up to 11 crowd that I usually hang out with can agree on. Natural sexuality is good. They can't agree on what the fuck natural sex is to save their lives, but they agree that it's good. And all I can say is that that's the biggest pile of seeming bullshit possible. Sex has gotten more pleasurable, more liberating, more generally healthy, the less we have to rely on doing it naturally. The more unnatural our sex lives have gotten, the more we've been able to expand our definition of what sexuality is and what it's for. If I sound a little bit heavy-handed on this, it's because it really does piss me off. For a lot of people, natural and healthy aren't the same thing, and they're regularly obliterated by the fantasy that nature is this sweet, benign thing that will cure all the ills visited upon humanity by industry and science. Take me, for example. Thanks to some minor brain damage suffered at birth, what's natural for me is for my brain to go through extreme surges of neural activity, resulting in a tonic-clonic seizure, properly known as a grand mal. The more seizures you have, the more you will have. Your brain learns to seize through practice, just like practicing guitar every day will teach you how to form chords and pluck the strings until playing Hava Nagila is second nature. What allows me to function on a regular basis, to be standing up here instead of thrashing around like Iggy Pop during a really top-notch performance, is taking 400 milligrams of carbamazepine and 1,000 milligrams of levetiracetam twice a day. You can ask my girlfriend what happens when I let my inner idiot take over, and I start dropping dosages. On top of that, my left shoulder here is held together by a plate of titanium screwed into the bone. In 2000, during one of my inadvertent returns to my natural state, I tore my shoulder out of the socket and smashed the bone into 3 separate pieces. So, thank FSM for unnatural. So the relentless romanticizing of natural lifestyles really does kind of piss me off. Because for it to work, you have to start by erasing a lot of people from the equation. Just think of how much effort it is taking for the burners to survive 1 week on the playa. And how much time it's going to take them to recover when they come back. Then think about doing that out of necessity, not because it's some kind of spiritual journey or art project. A lot of people depend on unnatural lifestyles to exist. And a lot of people have been able to liberate their identities through means that are distinctly unnatural, such as transgender people who transition surgically. For us in the alt-sex communities, it's practically a reflex to sneer when Pat Robertson or Maggie Gallagher talk about how unnatural gay or kinky sex is. It's a sign of how bizarrely, completely out of touch they are. But the same rhetoric is woven into our communities. Sex toys and health solutions are regularly hawked according to how natural or organic they are, as if that itself is the key to better orgasms. Pagans sanctify the ability of cisgendered women to give birth and the ability of cisgendered men to get hard-ons. An extreme example of what makes me cringe about this kind of thing is called ecosexuality. It sounds like something almost no one could dislike. Especially because one of its main adherents is Annie Sprinkle, who is one of the sweetest, most lovable perverts in the world, and who has admittedly done a lot of sex positivity. But as part of their work for ecosexuality, Annie and her wife, Beth Stevens, have had several public weddings where they married the earth, or various parts of it, taking the earth as their lover. And what makes me itch about the notion of ecosexuality, and a lot of similar movements, is just how much it relies on the Victorian romantic notion of nature as someplace that is benign, peaceful, and closer to God. As you can probably guess, I have no desire to get closer to God, even if he exists. It's based on a vision of nature that looks like a painting of Maxfield Parrish or Rossetti, all hazy light and gauzy blossoms, with the occasional winged fairy. And despite the saccharine sweetness around it, at its core I find it to be rather misanthropic. I think it makes a much better statement about your personality if you put all that effort into building connections with other human beings than marrying a pile of coal or the moon. The truth is that most people have a lot easier time loving the moon or mountain range than they do other people. Sex has actually gotten a lot better the less we're constricted by nature. A lot of the discussions and explorations of sexuality, orientation, gender, and alternative families are made possible by the fact that heterosexual penis and vagina intercourse is something you can do for fun, not as a survival strategy. Back in the old days, having kids was kind of like putting cash in your individual retirement account. The more you had, the more were likely to survive to adulthood, and the more you'd have to take care of you when you got old. The fact that having kids is a lifestyle choice instead of a duty to your community or family changes sex immensely. It means that we can think a lot more about what feels good, who we want to love, and fuck. Think for a moment of how much of sexuality we lose when we put what's natural on a pedestal and tie that to what's right or what's healthy. First of all, we lose birth control. All of it. From condom to the pill and the patch. Birth control is one of the best things to happen not only to sexuality but to gender. With the advent of the pill, gender roles started becoming a lot more flexible. No longer were we limited to talking about our genders as what part we played in the breeding process tab A into slot B. Second of all, we lose all of those other medicines that we use to make our sex lives safe. We get to deal with all natural. We get to deal with all natural, completely organic things like syphilis again. In its day, syphilis was more devastating than HIV and AIDS. Left untreated, it eats its way through your brain, destroying your ability to control your muscles, and ultimately leading to dementia. In the early 20th century, many moral guardians were vehemently against stopping the spread of syphilis or looking for a cure. They feared that if syphilis were cured, people would just indulge themselves in lust without reservation. And to a large extent, they were right. And that's a good thing. A lot of people who consider themselves sex positive forget that a big part of the reason that so many of the old taboos and gender clause dug their claws so deeply into the public consciousness is that sex was really, really dangerous in the old days. There were a lot of people who could feel the claws gouging them, drawing blood, and who knew that there ought to be a better way. But the case for a better way is harder to make when you regularly see people dying in labor or driven mad by infection. And the truth is that sometimes, even now, natural sex can be bad for you. When you pick out your condoms or gloves, for instance, it's probably best to ditch the organic, natural latex in favor of synthetic blends like polyurethane or nitrile. There's a lot of people out there whose bits get itchy when exposed to latex, so it's always polite to be carrying some of the unnatural stuff on your person. Something else that's unnatural but very good for sex is people's abilities to change their bodies. Whether you're talking about hormonal therapy for gender transition or something as basic as my shoulder, or medications like Viagra, or for that matter, antidepressants. People love to sneer at both of the latter because they're supposed to represent some kind of failure, sexually or emotionally. If you can't work out those things naturally, you've done something wrong. But the fact is, we're physical beings, and sometimes we need to modify the physicality of our bodies so that they work for us. To do that isn't a failure, and it isn't fake. In short, science has been fucking great for sex. We've gotten to where we are because we stopped looking at sex as something superstitious and mystical and as something that was part of the everyday world. Science didn't wind up turning us into cold-blooded Vulcans. It gave us silicone dildos and lube, vibrating toys, the Wartenborg wheel, the violet wand, and internet porn. Hallelujah. It's let us know more and better ways to fuck without hurting us or ourselves or our partners. And it might sound for a minute here that I'm going the other way, that I'm progressing towards some bizarre transhumanist vision where we'll all reach technological paradise after we've crossed the singularity. This is San Francisco after all, and that's here too. But that's not it. I'm trying to look at nature with a certain agnosticism. The beauty of science is that it examines and describes nature without sentimentality, prejudice, or fear, and then lets us figure out how we can go one better.
That is awesome.